Hello.
My name is Sarah, and I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how various communities were impacted by COVID 19. Today is February 13th, 2023. This week, there were 164 reported cases of COVID 19 in Charlotte Mecklenburg County, which actually shows a decrease of 23% over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is wearing a mask today for comfortability. Tania, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Tania. I am a Black female. I have my hair twisted in a bun. I'm wearing a blue mask and I have a black shirt with some flowers on it. I am from New York, and I've been in Charlotte since 2020. I am working at the library now, so.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. You moved here from New York
Yes.
for work purposes or something else?
Yeah, so I went to college in South Carolina and I graduated in 2020.
Okay.
So after I finished school,
Yeah.
I went back to up north and I ended up coming down here for a job.
Okay. Awesome. So, what did you study in college?
So I studied political science, and I guess it took up till now really to figure out. I don't know if there was much thought behind what I chose to study, but I'm a first generation college student, so a lot of it was kind of figuring things out on my own. And I liked at that time politics, so I chose political science. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you being first generation graduate. That's amazing. I bet your family was very proud of you.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that experience. How was it kind of being first generation, the first one to embark on your education journey?
I thought it was pretty regular. I went to school in South Carolina, not on purpose, it feels like. I knew at the time that I wanted to go to an HBCU. There aren't any HBCUs in New York, in the state of New York. So that kind of pushed me to the South. And I followed the money. I got a scholarship from my school. And that's how I ended up in South Carolina. And I think I didn't really feel that differently because a lot of students at my school were first generation college students, or most people were from South Carolina. A lot of people came from economically, I won't say that. Well, a lot of people came from lower economic backgrounds, but I don't think until after college, by at least a year, probably 2 or 3, that it hit me that maybe being first generation affected me. Because now I am post-grad. It's after that window where you still have those opportunities that are like, yeah, you just graduated, we'll extend, certain internships or job opportunities or program opportunities to you. So now I'm kind of trying to figure out what I can do with the degree that I have, along with the passion I have.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a journey that sometimes it's very easy to figure out, and sometimes it takes time to figure out. So you graduated in 2020. That probably means you hit some of the pandemic during your last year. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it was actually my last semester of school. And I feel like I wasn't paying attention. I didn't watch the news at all in college. I didn't read the news. In fact, I probably got most of my news from social media. So I feel like maybe I saw something on Twitter about COVID, but I didn't care. Like, I don't even know if what I saw was saying that it could possibly affect me. But it was spring break in March, mid-March or early March. We left for spring break. We went to Miami Beach. I think I had gone at least 2 spring breaks I had gone, maybe 3 spring breaks I had gone to Miami Beach. And we got there, me and maybe 3 friends that I went to school with. We got there halfway through our spring break. I just remember there being a news conference, and I don't know if it was the president or if it was the governor of Florida, but they were talking about lockdowns, and we had no clue what a lockdown is. I know at that time, in China, so it looked like the lockdowns there in some places were like locking down communities or locking down buildings. So we had no clue, but we thought that maybe they would lock down the state borders so we would get stuck in Florida. And I remember literally being on the beach on my phone with me and my friends. Our flight left in 2 or 3 days, and we didn't know if we should like get a car and drive back to South Carolina, if we had time to wait it out. We just didn't know what lockdown really meant for us. But we ended up waiting it out. We did our regular activities, but we like sanitize a little bit more, or, just try to be mindful of people coughing, that sort of thing. But we continued on. We made it to the end of spring break. We got to the airport, which was a little weird, but we got to the airport, and I remember maybe a couple people had masks. This was really before any mask mandates or anything. And I had this kind of sheer cheetah print scarf. And I remember feeling kind of embarrassed because I'm not really comfortable doing things that are against the norm. But I tied this scarf around my mouth to like make a mask. Mind you, it's sheer, so it's not really doing anything. But I tied this scarf around my face, and I sit like that the whole flight. I feel like it's pressing against my mouth, and it's making it hard to breathe comfortably. But, within the next couple of weeks, that's when mask mandates happened and lockdown happened. I didn't feel as silly after because nobody was really wearing a mask because we didn't know to. But by the time I got back to school, they were sending everyone away for 2 weeks, which turned to be the rest of the year. But they let me stay because I was from New York. And at that point, New York had become a hot spot. And if you were from a hot spot, they let you stay.
How did you feel?
At first it was okay. It was cool because like all the other cool New Yorkers or people from, other hot spots, we got to stay on campus and we got food and, it was fun to be with friends. But then I remember Twitter had a feature where it was showing you the metrics, and it felt like every day it doubled. Like it went from tens to hundreds to thousands. And I remember getting back, and I do this often, but I felt like I was getting sick. So I didn't know if I had COVID, and my mom had called a nurse friend, and we were on the phone, and I didn't. There was really nothing wrong with me, but I was kind of making it up in my head because I was so nervous. And then I was thinking about my family in New York because New York numbers were out of control. And I kind of felt like, like at that point, people were just dying. So I didn't know, like, is my family going to get sick? Like, I'm kind of safe, but I didn't feel comfortable going back. At first it was like fun, yay, we get to stay on campus, but then it's like, this has to end too. Like eventually I have to leave this campus. What am I gonna go back to? Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Tell me a little more about that, being separated from your family and New York being such a hot spot. I can imagine it was hard for you.
Yeah, I'm naturally a more internal person.
Okay.
I never really got homesick in school, but there wasn't really the pressure. You kind of have fun, you do the college thing, you go back for break, then you do it again. But of course, this time was different because there's COVID and there's a sickness that's killing people. My dad was an essential worker. And this was in the early days, essential workers were like, you keep like life going. You're a healthcare worker, you work at the grocery store, or like something truly like society would collapse. So my dad, he's a conductor for the New York City transit system.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, that's a huge.
they need to get to people who are, healthcare workers had to get to work, and they needed people to drive them there basically. So my mom is not an essential worker. She was able to stay home. My sister was able to stay home. But my dad was an essential worker, or is an essential worker. So, I was kind of worried about him having to go to work during, this time with high numbers. And then it's kind of a public facing job.
Yeah.
So that kind of made it worse. And I think that kind of caused a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was rushing to get back because, of course, why would I want to go into the hot spot? But like, I feel like being in New York, or at that point being in Jersey, because they had a house. My mom has a house in Jersey, so I didn't really cross the river. But being close to New York may not have been the safest thing, but it felt better because when, I was able to lay eyes on my family, it kind of is a little different.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So how long were you in New Jersey for?
From March until July.
Okay. And then you moved back for work, because that's when you started applying for work, correct?
Right. So I applied for Teach for America.
Oh, cool.
Whenever I applied. Maybe I was still in school. I don't remember. But the thing about Teach for America is you apply to their program and you rank cities.
Okay.
So I think I applied in Texas, Tennessee, and then I applied here in North Carolina. But, back to that thing about me not really knowing what I wanted to do. Law school was on the table, but, you have to study. And I knew I wasn't ready to go to law school immediately after undergrad. So it was something I knew about. I just applied. I didn't really want to be a teacher, but I just applied.
Okay.
Got it. And then found out I was placed in Charlotte.
Oh, okay. That's what brought you to Charlotte.
Yeah. So I didn't intend to move to Charlotte. It was just given to me, basically. Yeah.
So how long did you do Teach for America?
I did it 2 years. So I moved down here like July 23rd. I think that was the date. I found a roommate on Facebook.
Okay.
And I technically had a room before I had a school.
Okay.
So I moved down here in mid-July. And I started teaching in mid-August.
Okay.
And as isolating as COVID was, I guess it was kind of weird because I had like the foundation to have some sort of new friend group because I would be moving to Charlotte and starting this career with 100 other people doing the same thing,
Yeah.
basically. So I met a couple people,
Okay.
and it wasn't as isolating because, once again, a bunch of people are doing the
Yeah.
exact same thing.
All in the same kind of
Right.
Yeah.
So when we first started and we didn't really know how teaching would go at first.
Especially because you started right in the middle of
Right.
COVID.
We would do get-togethers and we do the outside thing and kind of wear masks and try to social distance. So that was fun at first.
Yeah. How about teaching? What did that look like for you? Versus how did it transition?
So the first year of teaching for me was different because it was virtual.
Yeah.
I think the year before they did regular school, and then when the pandemic hit, that was the end of school.
Yeah.
They ended early, which meant the kids missed out on, 2 months of schooling towards the end.
Yeah.
When we came back, everyone had some sort of technology device. So I would commute down to school, open up my laptop, and teach in the classroom to kids virtually.
Yeah.
It was really odd because that was my first time teaching. That was my first time working with children. I had no teacher training at all, really, except for the month of whatever Teach for America could fit in. And I didn't know who I would be teaching. And it turned out that the school that I was placed in, I didn't even interview for this school. It was open and HR just put me there.
Okay.
It was a predominantly Hispanic school.
Okay.
And a good number of the students, at least 60%, I would say, were learning English.
Wow.
And that varied from no English at all to
was that
mainly fluent.
challenging for you?
I think so, because in 2020, I believe, the George Floyd thing happened.
Yeah.
And that brought DEI to the forefront and a lot of spaces that it may not have been.
Yeah.
So what it did for me, at least, is it kind of highlighted this need for equity. But I think equity looks different for everyone. So it presented a new challenge of how do we give these kids an equitable education, because it's not really going to be fair. Well, I don't speak Spanish and I didn't speak Spanish. But one group of students gets to learn in a language that they can understand easily, and the other group of students just don't.
Yeah.
Like, that's not cool.
Yeah.
But I think as a person of color, I could resonate a little bit more deeply with that feeling than my white principal, my white assistant principal, my white teaching coach, and the rest of the all-white team, basically. So I think the thought a lot of times, and a thought, at least in my school, I don't know if it's a district thing, state thing, I don't know. But the thought is you teach in English and they'll learn. And for me, I'm like, if you put me in a classroom and everybody is speaking a foreign language, I'm not gonna learn. Like, how does that happen? And I think I just felt a duty to kind of bridge this communication gap.
Mhm.
So I did, in a way, start learning Spanish.
Wow.
But as a new teacher, I don't know if I focused too much on the language thing and didn't focus enough on the content. So I think there was a mix of new teachers. So another teacher on my team, actually 2 other teachers on my team had started the same year as me, and none of us had any sort of educational training. One teacher ended up quitting because of equity issues, according to her. And the other teacher, we stayed together, but we kind of had the same challenges of being expected to fill the gap of 2 months of missed learning at the end of last year, and then kids having to learn on Zoom.
Mhm.
This was a Title I school, so a lot of kids in poverty.
Mhm.
Some of these kids, I taught 2nd grade, some of these kids were home alone. Some of these kids were home alone and expected to take care of younger siblings. Some of them did have a parent home, but the parent wasn't literate, so couldn't help with a lot of things. Language was an issue too. The iPads were primarily or most of them were in English.
Mhm.
So the parent couldn't read what the iPad was saying in Spanish to help their kid.
Mhm.
Or if the iPad was in Spanish,
Mhm.
the kid, if they could read in English, didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So there were so many issues because of the language barrier,
Yeah.
because of, the whole economic issue of some of these parents still had to work.
Yeah.
They still had to work so that their kids had a place to stay. But,
Wow.
the kids still have to go to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was challenging in that way because you have a lot of factors and then you're still supposed to be good. Like, I'm still supposed to be a new teacher with no training, but I'm still supposed to be good. I'm still supposed to, teach the whole kid, but the only thing that matters at the end of the day is test scores.
Mm.
But then, you have some parents that'll sit there and do a state test for their kid,
Wow.
which will throw the numbers off. And then you have some parents that, don't even have a quiet space to offer a kid who might have done better had they been able to focus.
Yeah.
So that was the issue too. I think the public wanted kids to do well. The public wanted students to keep up, but there were so many factors. And there was so much pressure, but I don't know if a lot of the different pieces of teaching during that time kind of ever made it to the light.
Yeah.
To the general public, aside from people in education.
Yeah. Did you feel support from your program or from your school that you're working at?
Honestly, I wholeheartedly think that teaching was the worst, or teaching at the school I taught at with the people who were there was the worst thing I've ever experienced.
Wow.
It was truly brutal. It was extreme on my mental health.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was the only one.
Yeah.
I'm still technically a sub. So I love my kids dearly. I still call them my kids, but I love them dearly.
Yeah.
And part of me feels like I got the sub job just so I could check in a little bit on them.
Yeah.
And I went one time this year to the school, and one of the teachers was kind of, before, hey, hello, how have you been for these past couple of months? Which is yeah, I'm going to be joining you soon. I'm going to
Yeah.
leave the system soon.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a school, but it was truly brutal. There's a heavy emphasis on data. And people just wanting kids to read better or test better.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of factors that go into that.
Mhm.
And a lot of it does not happen in the classroom. but you can't control that, and you still are responsible for all of that learning.
Yeah.
In whatever weird way.
Yeah.
So students should be reading at home, but they might not have books, or they might not have someone that can help them read, but you're still responsible for them making the numbers of a kid that has the resources to read at home.
Mhm.
And then I just think time, there was such a emphasis on like filling the gap, closing the gap.
Mhm.
So like teachers need more training.
Yeah.
So they implemented like a 400-hour training over 2 years.
Wow.
That just like, we need more time.
Yeah.
So adding or filling up our time with training didn't help. Yeah, I think it was just, it was an absolute awful experience for every reason except for the students.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that. I can imagine how challenging that is. For you, as you transitioned out of teaching and into working at a library system, how has that been for you?
I think it's been a much better and a much more peaceful experience. I don't know what I expected. I did not visit the library before working here.
Yeah.
And I did not anticipate the kind of issues that we have in the library. And I hesitate to call them issues, but the thing about the library is like the library proudly accepts all.
Mm-hmm.
And after COVID, so many things have, spiked, including mental health crises.
Mm.
And that is something that we heavily deal with, especially at this library in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
This is a predominantly Black neighborhood. It's lower income. And we know Black lower income folks typically deal with mental health issues at a higher rate. So we have a lot of people walking in the middle of these crises, and we don't have any sort of training at least I don't have any sort of training to deal with that.
Yeah.
And there's just a high need for so many things. I work in the children's department specifically, and we have so many people coming in who want homework help or tutoring for their kids because of this gap from the pandemic. And, we don't have anything in place yet to help in that way. Like I said, it's a lot more peaceful. It's a lot less demanding. It's way more respectful of my time and the fact that I'm a person outside of this job. And I kind of think about my teaching as like going to the gym and building like this like high tolerance for a heavy load. So being here, even the hiccups are like really easy, like, oh, whatever.
Yeah. What a great perspective.
Yeah. So I love working with the public. It's a little difficult sometimes, and I wish that I had the power to do more. And I kind of feel bad because I see that a lot of the things that people here experience are because of the pandemic. And it's like, sorry, I can't help.
Yeah.
Can
you expand on that? Like, what are some things that you see here that people have struggled due to the pandemic?
I think immense poverty.
Yeah.
Someone just walked up and they needed documents to get aid and support from somewhere, but they didn't even have money to pay for the prints. So of course we, gave them the prints, but hardworking people who have multiple jobs and can't afford rent.
Yeah.
I mean, I can barely afford rent too, but I think during the pandemic and when everything or a lot of jobs became remote or there's remote working options, people from all across the country with all across the country income came to Charlotte, and I guess I'm one of those people, but came to Charlotte, and it increased the rent because there was a higher demand for housing. And they want quality housing. So there's a higher demand for luxury housing, or at least modern housing.
Yeah.
And it just raises the rent everywhere.
Yeah.
But the wages didn't necessarily go up, or they didn't go up high enough for the everyday person or Charlotteans to be able to survive. And that's something I struggle with, because as much as I notice it, and I'm from Harlem, so I know what gentrification looks like,
Yeah.
like on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of struggled being a gentrifier, basically. Coming to Charlotte for a job,
Yeah.
taking up housing. And the only thing I'm on the fence with is like, the job I took was not paying a lot either. I had to have a roommate to survive.
Yeah.
I'm still barely making it here. My salary, or, what I make, it takes 3/4 of my paycheck,
Yeah.
of my monthly income, to just handle rent alone.
Yeah.
So I don't have any leftover money for anything, aside from food and other bills.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can relate to the community in a way, but I don't even want to align myself necessarily, because I kind of feel like, how dare I?
Yeah.
How dare I be contributing to the problem, but say I relate,
Yeah.
you?
I see what you're saying. That juxtaposition.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I want to respect your time because I know you got to go. Do you have any additional stories or experiences that you would want to share with us before we finish?
Not that I can think of on the fly.
No worries. I appreciate you so much, Tania. I appreciate your time. And thank you for sharing your story with us with the Living Archives Project.